we're about to do the next exercise, which is how do you find an experience that is hypnotic without having been officially hypnotic, right? Because a lot of people have never officially been hypnotized, and yet there are countless experiences that are hypnotic in character, in nature, right? So, thanking you very much for the segue, why don't we go ahead and do that? Why don't we find an experience, what kind of experiences are hypnotic in character without being recognized, so we say, by society? Running. So something repetitive like running. Anyone here run? All right. Not from dogs or anything like that. I'm just like as a fun type hobby. So running is an interesting experience because those of you who are runners have heard of the runner's high. Anyone actually experience the runner's high? That's called trance. There is no physiological switch that occurs. It is a trance response, which is one of the reasons why different people get the runner's high, or the second wind, shall we say. The second wind comes different places for different people because their unconscious mind goes, oh, this is the trigger for me. That's why some people have to run 10 miles, and exactly when they hit the 10-mile barrier, boom, it comes. Other people have to run till exhaustion, and then it comes. Other people get it right at the beginning. There's no physiological reason for it. It's that they switch into trance. It's repetitive motion, it's attention. Repetitive motion is one way to bypass the critical factor. So there you have it. So if someone is a good runner, it's a exciting feeling, but at the same time, it's a great trance experience. What other experiences are there? Music? Listening to music. Anyone ever listen to music and kind of chill out and the rest of the world disappears? Yes? Have you ever had the experience where you're listening to music, someone comes in and starts talking to you, and you don't even notice for a few minutes? Right? What's that if not a negative hallucination? Absolutely. Reading a book, yes? Reading a book. Anyone ever get so absorbed in a book they don't even hear their own name being called out? Or have you ever read a book and actually had an emotional reaction? Anyone? Now, think about this. This is bizarre. You have a white page with ink. So you're responding to color, and you're having an emotion reaction as though something real had happened. But all you're looking at is white space with shapes on top. How the hell is that going to affect your emotions? You have to have a serious switch of realities in order for you to be able to get an emotional response like that. In other words, you've got to be able to tune out the rest of the world, put your critical factor on hold so you realize this is not real, get into the story so much that it can actually affect you on an emotional level. Because if I said, for example, to everyone here right now, go ahead and cry. Cry out of joy. And yet, if I asked you guys, and I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up, but if I asked you guys, how many of you have actually had a few tears, cried out of joy or of sadness, just as a result of reading something, I suspect most of you would be able to put your hands up. But that's just a piece of paper. So yes, reading something is a great hypnotic. So you begin to see how you can think as a hypnotist now to find situations that are hypnotic in character, although in society they're not recognized as such, which gives you a tremendous scope. Because then you can do a revivification without them ever realizing that anything is happening. As far as they're concerned, they're just having a great experience again, and somehow it's always when you're about. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
One is driving. And
Driving.
Listening to a motivational speech.
Driving and listening to a motivational speech, of course, apart from mine, because I would never dream of hypnotizing anyone in this room. So, what is it that makes the revivification work? Any guesses? What's the operating mechanism? I know we've got ABS, but what's the bit that actually allows you to have the whole thing triggered? How does it stimulate the unconscious? Where attention goes, energy flows. What you're doing is you're creating essentially a linguistic biofeedback mechanism where you are putting their attention on the event over and over and over again until enough psychological energy has if you like, entered that experience that it comes back to life. Where attention goes, energy flows. Think of it this way. Try this as an experiment. Everyone put your pens and papers down for a second. Put your hands in your lap without fingers touching. Everyone take one of your hands, I don't care which it is, but it's going to be the hand from now on, and lift it up. Bring it down. Lift it up, bring it down. That's kind of a mindless motion. Now I want you to do it with full mindfulness, so you actually get a sense of, this is my hand, and notice all the different muscles you need to move in order to get it up. All the muscles, which means you probably have to move quite slowly, otherwise you'll miss a few. Do you feel the muscles in your back moving? They have to. Do you feel the ones in your shoulder, the elbow, the forearm, even the hand itself? Do you notice how the fingers, actually how the hand changes slight orientation as it comes up, as it goes down? Put all your attention on that hand as it comes up and down. And when you get a sense that you kind of know or have a sense of which muscles are being used and how they're being used in coordination, go ahead and put your hand on your lap and close your eyes. And put all your attention on that hand, but on the sensation you had in that hand just one moment ago. The sensation of that hand as it lifts, as it moves up. All the muscles that have to move as it moves up. Put all your attention on that, trying to reconstruct that experience fully and completely inside your own mind. But not just in terms of your memory or seeing it, in terms of the actual hand on your lap right now, or off it, as the case may be. And notice what happens when all your attention is on the experience, there you go, of that hand, and what it really feels like when it lifts. Excellent. And we have a full sense of that. Just bring yourself back, feeling refreshed, relaxed, alert. Simply fantastic. Eyes open, full movement back in the hand. So, what kind of things did you notice? Did some of you actually lift the hand or have it lift? Right? It's natural. It's an ideodynamic response. Did some of you have the sensation that the hand really, really wants to lift? But you're thinking like, I'm not doing it, but it really, really wants to lift. Right? Did some of you get the sense that the hand was actually lifting, but when you open your eyes, you found it still lying there? One or two? Sometimes happens.
Twitching.
Some twitching. So you get some people get some micromuscular movements, twitches, little reflex motions, something like that. Right? So if you take what you just did, you took your attention, you placed it on an activity, the hand lifting, with such intensity it began to actually create the movement. Had you stayed longer with your attention on it, you would have actually had the movement. But of course, going back what we did earlier on with hypnotic gaze, if you let your critical factor get in the way, like, oh my God, what's going on here, and think too much, what's that doing to your attention? It's splitting it in two directions. One where you do it, and one where you don't. That's why people fail with hypnotic phenomena. That's one of the main reasons. Because they split their attention, the critical factor gets too much energy, and where attention goes, energy flows. So they kind of end up cancelling each other out. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? So this is why we want attention, because attention allows us to create the results or the effect that we want. And all you do is use your language as a pointing device to point out where that attention should be going to. It's very simple, right? So we're going to do an exercise with a different person, the same exercise as before, only this time you're going to choose a trance-like experience. And the way you're going to ask for it is say, you know, what do you enjoy doing? Do you like reading? Do you like driving a car? Do you like running, watching a film? Notice how the list of options I'm giving them are hypnotic ones. Now, if they come back with something which in your opinion is non-hypnotic, it's too, shall we say, complex for a hypnotic type experience, then ask them for other experiences. Eventually you will get one. And also recognize that any experience they give can be hypnotic if you revivify it. It's one of the beauties of revivification. Does that make sense to you guys? Go ahead, Rashid.
Maybe I'm the only one, but what you just said seemed very important. Could you repeat that again?
Sure. Let's repeat this again. So the principle is where attention goes, energy flows. So when you were thinking about your hand lifting, you began to sense that your hand was actually lifting. You began to sense preparations for it, like micromuscular twitches. And you began to sense the sort of desire for it to lift. That's kind of the setup before the hand actually lifts. Like, I want to lift it, but I'm not going to because I want it to happen automatically rather than me doing it myself, etc. Right? So had you kept your attention, those of you who didn't actually physically lift it, on that same motion, and you can do that tonight by all means, guys, it will eventually lift. It can't do otherwise unless or except if your attention isn't going towards what you want, but towards what you don't want. Like, I don't want to lift it myself. I don't want to be the one that's doing it. I don't know if I'm doing it. Is this real or not? Notice where your attention is going now. Now, if you split the stream of your attention, it's like having a garden hose with a certain amount of pressure. When you split it, the pressure lessens on both streams. So whatever attention you take away from what you want to be achieving and put it to something else, even if it's something irrelevant, even if it doesn't even affect or in any way the actual process you want, you're still weakening it because there's less attention, so there's less energy there. Does that make sense to you guys? So on the one side, people typically, that's why we bypass the critical factor. The critical factor absorbs attention. On the one side, the attention will actually inhibit the very thing that we want, which is actually kind of like negative energy. It's actually taken away from what we want to do. And on the other side, it's just purely weakening whatever attention you do have on what you want. So there's less energy, less attention on the positive result. So either way you lose, which is why we work so hard at bypassing the critical factor. Does that make sense to everyone? And this is exactly what we're going to do. You're going to do exactly what you saw happening here. You're going to repeat exactly what you did over there. Only this time, the thing for you to focus on, as well as the H plus and the questions and the echo and the moving through the present tense, the thing I want you to really emphasize is, do you have their attention? And do you have all of it? If you feel like you don't, then you probably don't. In which case, what do? Ask them a question. Ask them a question that they can't answer easily. If they can answer it easily, then ask a different question. And until they start to slow down and give you the responses you want. Now, if you will probably see this happening from time to time, which I think Barry was beginning to do a little bit. They'll take a while, they'll slowly start answering the question, which is what you want, but then they access that part of the memory and it all comes out again. At which point, what do? You ask another question. Now, the other way to slow them down, by the way, once you've asked a few questions, do you know what that is? Can anyone remember? I didn't actually point it out before. It's the echo effect. I'm using what he's just said in a frame of I'm just checking if I've got you right here. But in doing that, I'm slowing down the response. Oh, so you're sitting on the airplane. See how much I'm slowing everything down? So you're sitting on the airplane. You're sitting there. You're on the airplane. And you look out the window. You're sitting on the airplane and you look out the window. So what happens next? So you see how I've slowed down the whole thought process by asking the question, as well as by giving him what he's given me, but in the way that he's meant to be doing it. So I'm slowing him down. I'm actually training, I'm telling his attention what to do and how to do it, because there's a quality to this as well. Right? Does that make sense to everyone? So find a different partner, find a space in the room, 7 minutes apiece. I'll let you know when it's time to switch. Do that with, very importantly guys, use a non-obvious hypnotic experience. This room is starting to look like people have actually worked in it. You feel you're doing some work? So how did I go for you? Go ahead, 1 second. Microphone's coming.
I found this to be a very challenging exercise.
Okay.
You make it look so easy the way you echo, and when I found working with both people in this exercise, I could start echoing, but then it gets to a place where the person is, they're in a space, and I can elicit things like where they are or what they're doing, but it's hard to keep it going. They kind of get into where they're in the place that they want to be.
Right, so they're in that zone, and they're like zoning out a bit, and you don't know where to go from there. Is that right?
Well, I try to take it from the specifics of like when and where and so forth, and try to go for an inner.
If I can pause you there for a minute, in terms of the experience they're having, they're not just chatting to normal chit-chatty voice. They're kind of like, yeah, that's kind of what's happening, and that's, I'm there, and I'm seeing these things, yeah, and I'm feeling these things, and it feels great. And they're kind of that space, and at that point you go, what do I do now? Is that
what do I do with it? Yes.
Okay, great. Well, you just done the exercise. That is actually it, right? We haven't actually done anything with it yet. What you achieved is the purpose. After lunch, or maybe just before lunch, we'll see if we've got enough time, we'll actually do something with it. For the moment, it's just building a toolkit. So if you've got that far, then pat yourself on the back. Go ahead and do that now. It's good for you. Oh, you seem better. We love Wendy. Seriously, you got exactly what you meant to get out of this. You don't need to go any further with it. We'll add things to do with it later. For now, I just want you to get to that point where you get someone to that point where they're zoned out, where they're in trance, and there's nothing left to say because it's all been said and it's all been built up. Beautiful. Good job.
The blue and then the green.
Ahead.
The person that I worked with was very effective both as a subject and as the guide. But one thing that I noticed when I was being the guide and he was being the subject is that I had difficulty getting him to start expressing his experiences in the present tense.
Oh, that's okay. They don't have to.
Okay, that
You
was my
do it.
question.
You do that.
Okay.
They will slip into it. If you do it long enough, they will do it.
Okay.
And as long as that you're getting the trance response, that's all that matters.
That was my question.
That's fair enough. And the other thing to realize is some people have very strange relationship towards time compared to the Western standard, in which case they'll get all kinds of strange tenses of things going on. The thing to look out for is always, what's the unconscious response? In other words, are they going to trance? Do you get fixation of attention? Are you getting changing the biofunctions? Are you getting slower responses, etc.? Then you're away. If they're lighting up, you've got what you want.
Great. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I don't know, maybe we had a different experience because I found it actually very easy to kind of go in there, and I think, James, you probably did too, but we actually found ourselves just kind of, what you said, where attention goes, energy flows. We weren't really sure what we were saying and how we were going to get there,
Yeah.
but it just went, and as it went, it just continued going, and then
Perfect.
both of us actually had the same experience where we didn't expect that particular event, because he pulled the event out of me. He just asked me about a movie, and I was like, I don't see movies, and kind of like went with that. But it ended up at Horton, Here's the Who movie, and what the experience I had with my children watching it, and how he was able to translate that. So I found it to be actually one of the easier exercises in different from what was said before.
And you know what, guys? Don't this is not uncommon. As we go through, don't be surprised if some things which other people are breaking their heads on, you just go, got this one, this is easy. The other one, that's a hard one. Well, the things that are hard for you are the things that are hard for you, and the things that are hard for others are the things that are hard for them. So you'll find your strengths, you'll also find your weaknesses. The key thing is really when you find something you're not so good at, is to do more of that. Because that's where you get to grow the most, that's where you will expand the most. The things that you're really good at, sure, by all means use that as your foundation, because you can do those well already, but use them as foundations to launch other things off from. Does that make sense? Because that way you keep growing as individuals, as hypnotherapists, and so on. Go ahead.
One thing actually that happened in our experience was when the other person was working as the therapist, and my frame was so strong that at a certain point he stopped asking questions, and I came out of trance to look at him, and he'd gone into it.
Yeah, as a therapist, guys, you get paid to stay in a little bit of trance, but not too much. But it'll happen. From time to time it happens, so no, it's not a big deal. Learn from it and move on. Seriously. Thank you for that, though. Who are the next one? Go ahead.
I had an amazing experience on both sides of it, but as the subject, I was like full-on sort of hallucinating the experience as I was seeing the person talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also a kinesthetic kind of hallucination.
So you could actually feel the touch of things.
I was flying an airplane at the time.
Okay.
And I could feel everything. What I realized afterward is that I've had lots of experiences with therapists and people who, in trying to get people in touch with their feelings and, how did you, remember this thing and how did that feel? Okay, stick with that. Feel it right now. It's taking place in the present as just a discussion about a memory. And for me, at least, it's very difficult to get in touch with how I felt back then because it's very intellectualized. But this brought me into the experience, so it was very easy to talk about my feelings because I was in the feeling.
So that you've described elegantly in experiential points the difference between hyperamnesia, which is what you get when you intellectualize about a memory, even in vivid detail, and a revivification where you actually have the experience. So you can actually get to both in similar routes, but you've discovered that something about what you're doing here, this approach, actually gets you to live experience, re-experience it. So if you do want to get people in touch with their feelings, you know how to do it now. You revivify the event to the point where they have the experience again, which means the feelings come with it. Now, this is kind of an Ericksonian thing, because you now get to have the feelings without having to ask for them. You just ask for the experience, and you build the experience up until the feelings come with it. Whether they are negative or positive doesn't matter, because if they're negative, you can use those, you want to have those to be able to resolve them, right? This is how you do it.
So in a way, the notion that people always say, oh, I have a hard time getting in touch with my feelings, it becomes irrelevant, because we all have feelings.
Exactly.
As we experience
Exactly.
life.
What may happen from time to time is people will block their feelings, even in that present moment. So you'll see a strange disconnect between their intellect and what their body's telling you, right? And then part of what your function is to connect those two together again. But we'll play with some things you can do that with tomorrow more. Any more? Go ahead. At the top.
So when we did this previously, I thought it would be useful to use common childhood experiences, like learning to ride a bike or learning to swim. But then I thought that could be really bad if someone almost drowned when they learned to swim.
I'm glad you recognize that.
What would you do if you recognize that experience is bad?
First of all, if you start it with an experience and it turns out to be a little bad, you know what's going to happen? Chances are you'll get an ab reaction. Which means you do what? Okay, come on, guys. It's been a whole day. What do you do?
Stay calm.
What happens next?
Don't touch.
What do you say?
Fades.
Then what happens?
They
They start coming down. What do you do? I'm glad you remember that. So that's what happens. And otherwise, this is why people, well, in this context, choose the experience. You just give them the reference points to select from, right? Out there, I'm less likely to. Actually, even out there, I'll do regressions. What you really ask for is a kind of regression or revivification type thing. And once you know how to deal with ab reactions, they're okay to do, right? If you don't know how to deal with ab reactions, or you're in an environment where it's not appropriate to allow an ab reaction to even risk one, you just stay clear of that kind of thing specifically for that kind of reason. Does that make sense? But otherwise, I mean, here, you know how to deal with it now, right? Are you sure you know how to deal with this? Yes. So you get an ab reaction, what do you do? Stay calm. What happens next? Don't touch. What do you do? And then what do you say? And then what happens? I can go with that. Okay, thanks for the question. Anything else? Go ahead.
My experience was I couldn't get eye contact with my subject.
You couldn't get in contact with your subject?
No, eye contact.
Eye contact,
and
okay.
I was to the point where come around here kind of thing.
So
what happens with that?
just so I can understand, you were with the person in front of you, and they
Yes.
weren't making eye, you were looking at them, but they weren't looking at you.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
It's okay.
So
Like-
it works the same way even without the eye contact.
That's fine. It works absolutely. All the eye contact does, it adds an element. Now, if they can't make the eye contact, partly because they're in their memories, because they're looking around for them, that's okay.
Okay.
But the key thing is, are you getting the response? Now, if what you are getting is a disconnect from the person, not from the eye contact, so that they're like, yeah, and they're really just cutting you out as an individual, then you may want to use eye contact to arrest their attention to get what you want, to get what you need. Otherwise, you use the questioning and the echo effect strategies that we talked about the last session to get the same effect. So eye contact is an icing on the cake. It's an augmenter of other things. You don't have to have it, but when you do have it, it makes more of a hypnotic context than you had before.
Okay.
That's
Thank you.
all. Go ahead in the back. Anyone got a microphone for him?
Yeah, we mentioned about the eye contact. A lot of times when we're telling a story and we're remembering, we access different parts of our brain by looking down or looking up, that eye contact can prevent accessing those and getting back into that state?
Well, yes and no. Remember, when we're in trance, we function differently. So part of what you're doing with the eye contact is putting them in trance so they can function differently. When you're talking in a normal everyday setting, you literally work differently. So that's why people do the whole eye contact, eye movement around thing. And ultimately, the same answer we gave earlier on applies here, which is to say, if they need to move their eyes around, if trying to arrest their eye, get eye contact and arrest the eye movements is preventing the very pattern, the very approach you're trying to take, then stop it. Let them move their eyes around. If moving their eyes around is doing the opposite, in other words, if moving their eyes around is how it's disconnecting from you and from what you're trying to do, then just experiment with arresting their attention, arresting their eye movements, and see where that takes you. It gives you another layer of options. It's not, remember, what we're doing here is not hard and fast rules. The thought police will not come and arrest you if you do anything other than what I tell you to do, right? I don't have that kind of influence yet. So experiment, but you have more options, I think is the key thing. Go ahead.
Igor, one of the things that I have a problem with is actually when I hear you speaking to wrap my mind around the concept fully. But then when you have us do the exercise, it helps to bring it home. So that, first of all, I want to thank you for that because it makes a huge difference, I think, from a learning perspective. But on this particular component, I know I experienced it well. I didn't quite grasp my mind around it. So would it be accurate to say to ask for the experience and keep asking and echoing until the experience is now being felt and relived, and you can see the evidence of such occurring in your subject?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly what you do. You're using the questions. All the questions are there to do is to take their attention somewhere else and to get you information for the echo. So these two things, direct attention and the direct attention to something you can echo back to reflect back on them, which is really where the experience comes back to life, which is, I think, what you were saying then. And I totally agree with it. Okay, one over here. Oh, great. We should probably have one per row and just throw them around the place.
I find that when I'm looking very intently at the subject, I start to wonder, are they really where I want them to be? And I know that's my stuff coming in there, but I'm making some assumptions that they are where I want them to be, but I don't know.
You guys are great. After lunch, we're going to be asking exactly that question and figuring out how to resolve it. Because you're right, right? Hypnotists are traditionally people who speak at people, they just throw stuff out and hope some of it will stick. How do you know it's actually working, right? How do you get to rooting around inside someone's mind and know, oh, this is taking, oh, got a little bit more work here, right? Believe it or not, first of all, this helps you in terms of your performance. So if you're getting all those doubts, do more of this just for your own performance sake rather than for the answer, which doesn't negate the question that you've asked, because that question is a good one to ask whilst you're not doing it, right? Because that's the difference between performing and improving. And this is going to be the foundations to answering the question you just asked. That will be the foundation for it. But we won't go into that until we get to that point, because as Rashid nicely pointed out, there are some things that you better have experience of before understanding the concept. So we'll leave that for now, if that's okay with you. So we start in, how long have we got for break? 5 minutes. So lunch break's coming up now. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do after lunch so that your minds can start germinating some ideas. And we'll come back, we'll come back at the same time. So we've got 5 minutes extra for lunch. I know. So I'll leave you with this thought. If you spent all this time revivifying an interesting experience, how do you give someone an experience they've never had? Have a nice lunch. I'll see you in an hour's time. So let's start very quickly with a brief wrap-up of what we did this morning. Do you get a sense of knowing how to recreate or re-establish experiences inside people? And how that can create a hypnotic context. In other words, you can actually use the very thing that you're using in order to get a resource, in order to get the trance in the first place. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone, if you recognize the expression.